Hello everybody and welcome to the third of our series of SEED webinars dedicated to exploring how we can increase the level of commitment to more efficient product use. I'm Mel Slade, I'm from the IEA and I'll be your facilitator for today's event. We're pleased to see so many of you connected today and we'll hope you find the workshop useful and hope that you'll help provide us ideas and contacts in order to make this initiative as successful as possible. Let's turn to the agenda for today and I'll talk you through how the workshop will work. So we have a great lineup of speakers here, very knowledgeable on the subject, and hopefully will provide a great background to you all. We're going to start with a keynote address from Ms. Karen Rees from UNIDO. We'll move on to a presentation from Sir Nicholas Kay, the COP26 Regional Ambassador for Africa. Then we'll have a detailed presentation on this initiative and what it means technically from Kevin Lane from the International Energy Agency. And then we'll have a panel from the region discussing what this initiative could achieve, how we might go about it, and how we follow up on further details. So before we move into that panel, we'd just like to talk to you briefly about how we'd like to get some comments from the agenda. So next slide, please. You should be able to see here how you can click the chat box. If you could write your comments in, we'll try and answer as many questions as possible online. And if we're not able to, if we run out of time, then we'll try and answer them after the event. So that's the formalities. We hope to make this as interactive as possible. But now I'd like to give the floor to Karen Rees, the Programme Coordinator from UNIDO, to say a few opening remarks for us. Karen, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Melanie, and thank you so much for inviting us to give a little overview of the regional approaches to accelerate the market transformation towards energy efficient lighting and appliances that UNIDO is working on with the regional sustainable energy centers in Sub-Saharan Africa. Next slide, please. UNIDO is the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, and we are a specialized agency of the United Nations with our mandate to promote and accelerate inclusive and sustainable industrial development in developing countries and in economies in transition. Obviously, access to sustainable energy is a very crucial process. It's a very crucial aspect in industrial sustainable development. So we are putting a very strong focus on energy efficiency in various aspects. Next slide, please. I thought before I start with my presentation, I show you a picture here, which our colleagues from CLASP have presented recently in a very recent report, where we see the appliance ownership in Sub-Saharan Africa today, where 1 out of 3 households own a television, 1 out of 6 own a refrigerator, 1 out of 9 own a computer. And in rural areas, the access is even lower, just about 4% of rural households own a refrigerator. But this will change significantly and markets need to be prepared. I think this is our mission, and it is clear that with economic development, the access to appliances will increase significantly, and therefore there is an urgent need for action. Next slide, please. So what are some of the barriers that are hindering a market transformation in Sub-Saharan Africa towards energy efficient lighting and appliances? Most of the countries are very import oriented markets, and there is an absence of a common policy framework for energy efficient lighting and appliances. There's an absence of MAPs, minimum energy performance standards, in most countries, or also other policy and regulatory frameworks. There are also significant barriers that still exist around awareness, access to finance, and around capacities in particular. One particular barrier that can be seen as that actions that have been taken by countries, and of course a number of countries have already put in place one or the other program, very often under demand-side management programs of utilities, but often these programs are ad hoc versus systematic approaches. So what is really needed is this transformative approach to achieve this market transformation holistically, rather than putting ad hoc measures in place. Lack of capacity to develop and implement regulations such as maps is also a key barrier. And after the putting in place of the regulations, one of the biggest challenges is the enforcement capacity, which also includes the absence of local testing facilities. But in general, enforcement capacity is a big challenge and a big barrier in the process. Border controls, customs, and also leakages on borders have also been identified as quite some challenges for a majority of countries. And one aspect I want to highlight here is that we have seen there is quite a lack of motivation from the private sector to invest once, as long as standards are not yet in place and enforced. And the country-focused markets are also seen as a barrier for the private sector, because if countries have individual and non-harmonized approaches, then it makes it very difficult for a private sector to enter the markets. And what we also see is the lack of service providers with viable business models that can deliver efficient energy services. Next one, please. I think the benefits are known, so I will just shortly mention a few, particularly in times of economic recovery processes. Household savings, of course, are one of the very crucial benefits of energy efficient appliances. Grid reliability, obviously reduce electricity shortages and peak power demand are some of the positive effects. Safe investments that of very short budgets in general already do exist in most of the countries. The market protection is a very important aspect, because one thing is for sure, most countries in the world already moved or have moved to put regulations in place, to put standards in place, and to not allow any of low quality and inefficient products anymore. So we have to be aware that if Sub-Saharan Africa remains the only region that does not put measures in place or regulations and has a strong enforcement capacity, then we are risking to become a dumping ground for technologies which are banned anywhere else. Also, of course, energy imports, you reduce capital outflow for fuel purchases, etc. And climate change, of course, is also one of the benefits of such a market transformation. Next slide, please. Here's a quick overview of the opportunities, because besides of the barriers, there are huge opportunities in Sub-Saharan Africa to create markets for efficient appliances, and countries will benefit from greater energy security. I mentioned the household savings already. Less power use means fewer CO2 emissions, obviously, so the environment also benefits. And one big aspect which is really, really crucial is that these new business opportunities that are created are strongly benefiting the local markets. So it boosts the economy. Next slide, please. Why regional collaboration? And I want to highlight a few examples of regional collaboration today. Regional collaboration in market transformation is very crucial because it eliminates the trade barriers for energy efficient products, and it unlocks economies of scale. We are creating large markets that are harmonized by a regional collaboration, and this through economies of scale also will increase affordability of energy efficient products. Regional collaboration has the advantage to enable common monitoring, verification and enforcement. It also supports a coordinated compliance planning, and it has a great potential to avoid duplication of compliance efforts. And here we can also highlight that the regional sustainable energy centers, where we have 3 of them in Sub-Saharan Africa, they play a really pioneering role in this regional harmonization process. Next slide, please. This is just an example from Eastern and Southern Africa to show how the energy savings have been calculated. We did a market study in our program, in the regional program in Eastern Southern Africa, and the figures are quite interesting to see that the energy savings in 2030 equal basically 5 to 8 times Kenya's total electricity consumption if we put ambitious regulatory frameworks in place for these most common appliances which are listed here. Next slide, please. So here I would like to mention one example of such a regional effort which is currently on the way in the SADC region and the East African community. It's a program that's called Energy Efficient Lighting and Appliances in East and Southern Africa. In short, we call it ELA. It's funded by the Swedish government and implemented by UNIDO and the 2 regional centers, IACRI and SACRI. And the ELA program really aspires to achieve such a transformational approach where we, on the one hand, have vibrant markets where the suppliers are delivering high quality services and products. And on the other hand, we have an increasingly aware population, household businesses, public facilities, and industries across these 2 regions that demand those energy efficient appliances. And it's a very holistic program where these 21 countries are participating. We started about 1.5 years ago, currently in the final stage of the regional consultation process for the minimum energy performance standards for lighting, and together with the colleagues from the United for Efficiency, also maps for refrigeration and air conditioning are already in discussion with the regional committees. But apart from this regional policy process, we put here a very strong focus on stimulating access to energy services, because there needs to be a big shift from focusing on products towards focusing on delivering services. A customer is interested in a service rather than in a product, in a service such as lighting, such as cooling, etc. So we do have a strong capacity building focus where we collaborate with our colleagues from the Swedish Energy Agency, for example, in strengthening the testing facilities in these 2 regions. We collaborate with our colleagues from CLASP on the policy and regulatory framework, but also in looking into productive use aspects, which is a strong focus of this program. And the next and last slide, please. So the private sector aspect is something that is in a very nascent stage in most countries, particularly in these two regions that we are working at. Private sector in the sense of energy service companies, for example, because there is a huge potential for energy service companies in aspects, for example, such as street lighting, but also in cold chains and in other areas. So we have put in place a private sector support facility, which provides technical assistance to potential clients, such as municipalities, industries, etc., to establish such sustainable energy service business models. And we also offer financial support to provide energy service companies, particularly to cover upfront costs to purchase equipment. So this is one example that these two regions have decided to move together. Also, I know West Africa, the ECOWAS region, has started with lighting quite some years ago in a harmonized approach, and they've also moved to cooling appliances. I'm sure a colleague from Ghana will talk more about this later on. But to conclude, I would invite you to participate in a current discussion that is ongoing for the next 7 months under the Vienna Energy Forum. It's an online webinar series on energy efficient products where you can tune in at any session that takes place on a monthly basis, where we hope to mobilize countries to move towards a stronger acceleration to the uptake of efficient appliances. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Karen. Great introduction, and a really important kind of scene setter for us today. Hugely rich in information, of course, but I'd just like to kind of pick up on 3 things briefly. We'll come back to more connections later on, but your mention of the systematic approach, I think that's incredibly important because, as you say, traditionally these things have been somewhat piecemeal. And one of the ideas behind the UK-led initiative is to help pull together as many of the players as possible. Market protection, you mentioned in terms of, you can write regulations, but you need to actually be able to implement them, enforce them. The economies of scale, of course, to make sure that the efficient appliances are not more expensive than those inefficient ones. And also something that we'd like to encourage a lot is this idea of a long-term approach. So not just what level do I want to set my standards at today, but what do I need them to be in 10 years' time in order for us all to move together to a kind of sustainable energy future. So thank you so much for that. And we'll come back, of course, to questions at the end. But I'd now like to introduce Sir Nicholas Kay, who's the COP26 Regional Ambassador for Africa. And he's going to introduce the UK's thinking on this really, really important subject to us now. So, Sir Nicholas, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Melanie. And it's a pleasure to be with you this afternoon. This is the awkward moment when I wonder whether I'm just talking to myself or people can see and hear me.
We can see and hear you, Sir Nicholas.
Fantastic. The relief is enormous. Great. Well, thank you, Melanie, for the introduction, and thank you, Karen, for that very rich presentation. Let me just start by saying that I don't want to take too much of your time because you have a very important panel and detailed discussion later, and I'm afraid I'll not be able to stay for the panel discussion. But I do want to just set out a little bit about COP26, which may be relevant to your discussions today, and also our UK product efficiency initiative that we're undertaking as a part of our presidency, incoming presidency of COP26. We're all meeting at a very difficult time, and this is hard times for COVID reasons. But it's also a hard time for the planet, as we know. Every single measure that we have tells us that the planet is on current trajectory heading towards an extinction crisis. Very easy to say, very difficult for us to comprehend. But as we deal with these two crises, COVID and the climate change crisis, it is very important that we plan for green and resilient recoveries from these, and that decisions we take now, we shouldn't take in the short-termist way and lock in polluting emissions for decades, and so make our society more vulnerable. So I'm very pleased that the UK is working with the African Union, for example, on a Green Recovery Action Plan, which is more or less finalized in these last few weeks. So let me say I'm the COP26 Regional Ambassador for Africa, and my role is as COP presidency, incoming COP presidency, to ensure that the Conference of the Parties in Glasgow next November really meets and serves Africa's interests, because I'm absolutely clear there will not be a successful COP26 unless we address Africa's concerns and interests. And I'm also equally sure that unless Africa addresses climate change, adaptation and resilience issues, then they will also not be successful. So COP26, those of you, I'm sure absolutely everybody understands what it is and what it isn't, but let's just recall that nearly 3 decades ago, countries came together at the United Nations and agreed to prevent dangerous climate change. And over the years, as the dangers of climate change have become ever more real and present, the international consensus for action has grown stronger. Our COP presidency falls during the first significant test of the Paris Agreement, and the gap to 2 degrees currently stands at about 15 gigatons. We need a 5-fold increase in action to close that gap to 1.5 degrees. So next year, in November 2021, at COP26, we're not negotiating a new treaty. That was done last in Paris in 2015, and before that in Kyoto. This is checking that what we agreed in 2015 is being implemented and that we are on course to meeting our commitments. And it will be no surprise to you to hear that when we meet next November, we are going to discover that we are behind. We may be on course heading in the right direction, but we are behind very significantly in terms of delivery. So our presidency for this year is also focusing very much on action and galvanizing and marshalling action and ambition to take us to a course correction, if you like, in November next year, so that we get back on track to meeting the world's commitments. And so we are organizing next month, for example, with French and United Nations, and in partnership with Italy and Chile, a climate ambition summit, which will be a chance for world leaders to get together virtually on the 12th of December and to raise the level of ambition, whether it's on emissions, whether it's on adaptation or climate finance. So with our emphasis as COP presidency on action, we are championing 5 campaigns during this coming year. We want to work with all the countries because as presidency, we are serving the interests of all the 190 odd member nations. We want to share the opportunities of clean growth and ensure that international action on adaptation and mitigation is taken equally seriously. And we'll be working with businesses and organizations and civil society and NGOs to avoid dangerous climate change and move on to a credible path. We want to be inclusive as presidency, working with all stakeholders. And we're working on these 5 core campaigns, which are energy transitions, clean transport, finance, nature, and adaptation and resilience. And some of you have seen recently the UK Prime Minister's announcement of a 10-point green industrial revolution plan, and where all of these energy transition, clean transport, etc. feature. So the subject of today, which is a part of building towards COP26 next November, is product energy efficiency. And we see this very much as a part of the UK's COP26 Energy Transitions campaign, as one of the areas which brings particular importance within the context of both climate change and our COVID response. We must also recognise that product efficiency is often an overlooked area of climate action. But as we saw from Karen's really impressive slides, it is of such importance. I learned something from that as well. I mean, the scale of the potential energy savings from product efficiency to be 5 times, say, Kenya's own domestic consumption now is quite striking. There are many win-win opportunities for deploying energy efficiency policy in a context of recovering from COVID. There is the potential to unlock wider benefits as well, for boosting the economy, creating jobs, as well as for improving energy security, reducing fuel poverty and inequality, providing health benefits, and of course for meeting our international climate goals. These were all outlined by Karen. So what is the Product Efficiency Initiative? For COP26, we want to use the opportunity of this global conference to boost international action on the important area of product efficiency. Improving the efficiency of high energy consuming products like cooling products is critical to managing future energy demand and reducing emissions. Also for improving energy security, accessibility and affordability. I see it as straddling both mitigation and adaptation and resilience priorities. So we've launched in close collaboration, and that's why we're here today with the IEA, a COP26 product efficiency call to action as part of our broader energy transition campaign. We have 2 key aims. First, to strengthen the super efficient equipment and appliances deployment initiative. Quite a long term, but popularly known as SEED, Super Efficient Energy and Appliances Deployment Initiative, to support countries to raise ambition and coordinate regionally on product energy efficiency more quickly, easily, and at lower cost. And secondly, we want to drive this ambition to be consistent with the aim of doubling the efficiency of key products sold globally by 2030, doubling the efficiency of key products, focusing our efforts on air conditioners, refrigerators, industrial motors, and lighting. We will be working closely with our co-leads of the SEED initiative, India, and the European Commission to bring this action to fruition through SEED, bringing it to COP26, as well as aiming to secure SEED's position as a key international organization for coordinating action on product efficiency policy globally after COP26. To do this, we want to re-engage existing SEED members, expand its membership base further, focus its efforts and scope to support countries in achieving targeted action on key products globally, and convene dialogues to support best practice sharing. As we establish a new pathway to COP And amidst our international response to COVID-19, we want to mobilize and garner your support for this initiative and for action on energy efficiency as critical to meeting both the challenge of climate change and COVID-19. Ahead of COP26, we would like countries across the African continent to join SEED and boost your representation in this initiative so that you can, first of all, share your experience and best practice on implementing product efficiency policy. And secondly, access knowledge and expertise from member countries globally on areas of challenge for raising product efficiency standards. And finally, to support the coordination of action on product efficiency. We can see that by coordinating action on product policy, particularly on minimum energy performance standards, MEPS, we can make the market simpler for industry, as well as aggregating the demand for high efficiency products and bringing down the costs for consumers, with results in benefits for health and resilience. We know that this area is of paramount importance for many reasons, and with our close partners and all of you on this call today, we can achieve action which is focused, meaningful, and leaves a legacy that puts energy efficiency firmly on the table. Thank you for your attention, and thank you for joining this event today. I hope the discussion that follows is rich. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sir Nicholas. Great to have that reminder about the global narrative and about the challenges we're facing and how energy efficiency can make a major contribution. And thanks also to your support for this important aspect of energy efficiency, which, as you said, can often be overlooked, but is hugely important to boosting the economy, creating jobs and improving people's lives. So we'll come back to all of those issues later on in our panel discussion, but thanks again once more for your support to the initiative and to the IEA in particular. So we are going to move on now to following on from that introduction from Sir Nicholas. We're going to move on to a much more detailed presentation on what do we think this really means in practice. What do you think we can all do together to increase ambition on product efficiency? And to make that introduction, I welcome Dr. Kevin Lane from the IEA to lead us through the next part of the presentation. So Kevin, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Melanie, and thanks to the previous two speakers as well. Before going into the product initiative, I'll just very briefly mention SEED again and then take you through some more details of what it actually means. So next slide. Next slide. So the Super Efficient Equipment and Appliances Deployment Initiative, or SEED, was basically set up about 10 years ago under a Clean Energy Ministerial. So it's a group of governments that got together to try and basically increase the efficiency of energy using products. And at the moment, it's been led by the UK, the European Commission and India, and the IEA is currently the operating agent or doing the operating tasks for this group of countries and also the current 18 member countries that are in there. The main aims, as Sir Nicholas was saying, was really trying to raise ambition of energy efficiency of these products amongst the partner countries, both to highlight the importance of energy efficiency of these, but also to raise standards. That's both for consumers to buy them, but also the manufacturing sector to supply them. And as was mentioned already, SEED is going to track initially 4 products that were mentioned. So that's going to be electrical, industrial motors, air conditioners, refrigerators and lighting. And these will be our 4 key products. Next slide. And this is just a map to show you the current 18 SEED member countries that we have. So we have one in Sub-Saharan Africa at the moment, and we would, of course, be trying to expand this. We have some partner organizations as well who are supporting this initiative. So I'll leave SEED at this point and go to the next slide. And next slide. So the COP26, or the Seed Product Efficiency Call to Action, is basically we're trying to, for these 4 products, to double the efficiency of these products by over the next 10 years. By double, it could be a little bit higher or lower, depending on the country or the end use, but we really do want to substantially improve the efficiency of these products that are being sold. The key driver will be, of course, to try and meet national climate change targets, to try and reduce emissions, as Sir Nicholas eloquently put it. But it's also to help consumers to have more affordable products so that they can, make better, have better quality lives, better businesses, and just better lives. Also, it should drive innovation or stimulate innovation and provide opportunities for businesses to manufacture these more efficient products as well. And finally, it should also have a co-benefit of removing ozone depleting and high global warming potential refrigerants that are in these refrigerators and air conditioners. So it's a win-win at the same time. So these are the main objectives of this call to action that we currently have. So go to the next slide. And why these products? Well, globally, it's a substantial amount of energy that can be saved by 2030. Billions and billions of dollars just in the energy costs. There's a lot of carbon that has been emitted just to power these end users. In Africa, I think Karen's already shown that it's also very substantial, and it will become even more so over the next years as Africa becomes wealthy. So at the moment, only 1 in 20 might have an air conditioner, say, and we'd expect that to rise with wealth, with higher temperatures and higher expectations as well. So go to the next slide. So in terms of raising ambition and trying to double the efficiency of these products, we're going to support that by using something called a performance ladder. But all we're basically trying to do is set performance tiers or thresholds or stepping stones, just where the next levels of efficiency are going to be. So we can visualize as a ladder here, say on the right, at the bottom rung is an inefficient one, and we just try to raise the efficiency over time to climb that ladder of efficiency. So those different tiers or thresholds or rungs, they're very important to define because they can be a good shortcut for policymakers because they can be quite technical to set. So they can be used for minimum energy performance standards to remove the worst on the market. Can also be used for different label categories. They can be used for energy technology lists or funding programs which will specify a certain tier. They can also be future levels as well. So the key steps to doing that really is to have a testing procedures. How do you measure the efficiency of these products? And this can be very, very technical, which is why limiting this or having the work done in advance actually makes it a lot easier for policymakers to engage, so that not everyone has to go through this process of deciding what an efficient product is. Once you've done that testing and measured the efficiency, you can have different thresholds. So you limit the number of performances that are there. And that's quite useful because it means manufacturers don't have to produce multiple sets. It can just be a limited number of products, which means you can get economies of scale by manufacturing more products. In terms of the work, that means we would then say, well, once you have the ladder, what are the next steps? How are you going to climb that ladder into the future? And that's where the policymakers come in to define that. If you go to the next slide, it's more clearly shown by an example. What we have here is our efficiency ladder for motors, and the IEC, so an International Electrotechnology Committee. So they've already done a lot of the hard work by saying this is how you measure a motor, whether that's regardless of the size and the number of poles, what frequency. They can already put it into one of 5 bins, whether it's a low efficiency IE1 all the way up to a super efficient IE5. So this is very helpful. That work has already been done. And countries around the world have already started to use that to set their policies. So if you look at Vietnam, they've used it to set their MEPs at IE1. EU is a little bit higher. They've set their MEPs or minimum energy performance standards at IE3. And we've also seen a couple of countries in Sub-Saharan Africa have also started to use that. So Kenya has set its MEPs on IE1, but also they've used the tiers of this ladder to set their energy label as well. So they can see that a 3-star motor in Kenya would be an IE3, and that would be the same IE3 motor that you could buy elsewhere in the world. So these steps are then quite important for setting policy, and it could be that you set other policies related to this. So next slide. Next. Okay, so for here we've got it again. Okay, thank you. So here's might be say a country, say Kenya, which has set maps at I1 today, but they could signal to industry that we're going to climb up that ladder and set future maps at those specific tiers. Next. And at the same time, they can also have other programs to try and subsidize or support industry to or manufacturers or consumers to purchase more efficient motors, which then become the future maps. So they might support i3 motors today, which become the maps in 5 years' time or 10 years' time, say. Next. A lot of countries, of course, don't have maps, and so they should just use the shortcut and use these rungs of the ladder to introduce their maps or other policies. And if they're introducing maps, the U4E, one of our partners, they've got some very good model regulations to say how you would introduce such model regulations. And I think that's the word of UNIDO as well, are trying to support this action as well. And of course, the regional centres have already got this experience as well. But in these model regulations, they can say what should be covered and what specific levels could be in there. Next slide. So motors is quite simple. Lighting becomes a little bit more challenging because there's a lot more products on there, and they also have different services as well. So if you look at a general service lamp, that's just a simple lamp that goes into the ceiling. This will usually come in different technologies, and some countries have tried to phase out very inefficient ones just by saying a general service lamp should reach a certain efficacy or efficiency level and raise that over time. Some countries, such as Ghana, just banned the technology and said, no, you can't have an incandescent lamp. Some countries are then also just looking at the specific technology. So they're looking at, say, a general service and a non-directional LED lamp. They've set already some thresholds going up from, say, 68 lumens per watt up to 120 lumens per watt. And if they're to revise their program in the future, they'll probably add some additional ones on and raise the maps going into the future. The U4E model regulations has some draft levels as well, and some technical ideas how to implement that. Next slide. I'll go back one. So there, yeah, in addition to the efficacy with lighting, we may also add some other things to the requirements as well. So it could be the lifetime of the lamp to make sure that they are lasting a sufficient amount of time. Color rendering or mercury content can also be important aspects that you would include. And some countries might have some other requirements like being tolerant to high or low temperatures. Next slide. Air conditioners is another challenging one as well. It's down to test procedures. So there are, the International Standards Organization has come up with one that most countries are trying to follow. So if we look at these all on the same ladder, there's actually multiple steps at the moment. And different countries do have different maps and different high performance levels or different energy labels that they're using at the moment. Ghana was one of the first countries to introduce an air conditioner. Maps at 2.8 on an energy efficiency rating. This is a slightly different scale which maps out to there. But it can be useful to then say what the future steps will be. But we need to be careful on this because of air conditioner testing procedures. They're not always 100% comparable. So there's still some technical work that needs to be done there. Next. And when we're looking at air conditioners, the other thing we should be wary of or aware of is the refrigerant that's being used. So having a low global warming potential refrigerant is also an important aspect in terms of mitigating climate change. And many countries have signed up to the Kigali Amendment, which is also trying to phase down the use of these refrigerants. So these two should be going hand in hand. Next slide. So in terms of mapping out these performance levels, the work we're doing at the moment is just going through existing regulations. A lot of countries have already performance tiers or thresholds in place. So we're mapping these out. There are some other good tools that are being used around the world. So I've already mentioned U4E's model regulations, and they're setting some of these performance thresholds as well. So these are important. There's also GTS, the Global Technology Selector. So some development banks are also funding or putting money in or helping consumers purchase very efficient equipment. And the thresholds are implied within these databases as well. So it's important for us to try and map these thresholds as well, because money will be subsidizing these particular products going into the future. In terms of future performance levels, we're also looking at cooling action plans and also roadmaps to say what they could be. And then we're going to have some action to try and harmonize, to try and corral these into a few defined number of levels. It's more clearly seen if we go to the next slide. Here we have residential air conditioners. And this is actually a very good example from, actually it's Kenya. So in 2018, if you looked at their market on an energy efficiency rating basis, it went from say 2.5 to 3.5 was the range of efficiency of products on the market. Later in 2018, a new MAPS came into place, which is set at 2.8, which actually eliminated quite a large part of that market. And then it was followed up again in 2019, where it was raised further to 3.1, which means that about 3/4 of all the products that were on the market in 2018 are no longer on there. And the 2020 market is now substantially more efficient than it was just 2 years ago. So just through these two regulations, a substantial increase in efficiency has happened in the Ghana air conditioning market. The challenge then is to say, well, what should it be in the future if we want to raise ambition? So this is, I think, the challenge for Kenya and for all countries is how quickly can you raise the efficiency of these products going into the future. By having the performance tiers, we can say set a particular 5-star level in 2023, could become the MAPS level by 2030, say. So having the same performance levels is quite important. I've also added the model regulations, where their starting point was a 5.6 for this particular efficiency metric. So I think there is potential to raise the efficiency of these products quite substantially. But of course, it's up to the governments, the regional centres to decide what they think should be these future steps. Next slide. I just wanted to finish on this last slide just to show you what's happening in Sub-Saharan Africa in terms of MAPS, but also energy labels for these 4 products in the different countries. We already see that some countries have got quite a rich history in this area. So whether it's Ghana, South Africa, Kenya, they've got very good programs and really useful ones to learn from and how they've done it. But the regional centres themselves are starting to expand their activity, as you heard from Karen earlier. So I think it's actually a very exciting time in Sub-Saharan Africa in terms of standards and labels policy. There's huge opportunities for reducing energy, and now is actually a very good time to be setting future ambition, but also aligning what these could be and what the stepping stones towards significantly more efficient products should be. So next slide. So just to summarize, the SEED or the COP26 product efficiency call to action, it's initially targeting these 4 products, and we want to see a substantial improvement in efficiency to 2030. The way that we're then going to do that is then having some identifiable stepping stones to get there, which should make product policy easier. And that will also be helped by some sort of regional harmonisation and also international harmonisation to make that a much easier, cheaper and smoother process and a quicker process to happen. In terms of the next steps, it really needs the countries to commit towards raising that level of ambition, to say that they do want to go on that path. And then there's the technical aspect of, well, just what are these MAPs, what are the standards, what are the policies going to be that will help realise that raised ambition, which is going to be good for consumers, the environment, for all the reasons that were listed earlier. And at that point, I'd like to thank you for your attention and hand back to you, Melanie.
Thanks very much, Ken. And thank you for giving us that kind of detailed overview of the current thinking on the initiative and how it should play out. So to everybody on the call, the reasons we're holding these webinars are to share this thinking and then to be able to go into the detail and work out where those steps might be, alongside working with governments to encourage the adoption of the initiative. So we're going to now go, in order to make that real in the South African context, we're going to go into a panel presentation now where we're going to hear from speakers who've who either live and work in the region or are active in the region to see how this might pan out in practice. So at first we're going to go to Mr. Kofi Agako from the Energy Commission in Ghana, and Kofi, who's very well known in this world, is going to give us an introduction to where things stand there. So thanks, Kofi.
Thank you very much, Mel, and thank you, the previous presenters. I think that you have made my work easy this afternoon by giving a very good introduction to almost everything that I have to say. Next slide, please. I have this statement here that if you think standards and labeling is expensive, try environmental dumping. That is to say that Ghana has benefited enormously from standards and labeling, and we have never regretted for the kind of investment that we have put in this. Standards and labeling are very good tools for sustainable development. There's no doubt about that. But unfortunately, certain nations are scared by the initial investment. But the truth is that it is worth investing in, because in the absence of standards and labeling, you end up opening your country to dumping of environmentally harmful products. These products are more expensive in terms of running costs, in terms of the effect on the environment, the health implications, and all that. So it is always better to think of investing in standards and labeling as against not doing anything at all. Next slide, please. I'm going to give you snapshots of the benefits that we have derived as a country from the adoption and the introduction of standards and labeling. First thing I'm going to talk about is transformation of the appliance market. Once upon a time, cooling appliance market in Ghana was dominated by used and energy inefficient products laden with environmental harmful refrigerants. With the introduction of standards and labeling and the robust enforcement that we put in place, we have managed to turn the tables. Now, the new and energy efficiency products control about 98% of the market. And the savings alone, as you can see, 3,624 gigawatt hours is enough to power a small district in Ghana. So this is kind of an avoided cost. If you look at the graph, the red bars represent old and inefficient refrigerating appliances that were shipped to Ghana between 2005 and 2013. We banned the importation of those appliances in 2013. So you see a steep drop. And then the new appliances, colored blue, began to take over the market. And this is a good success story that we have to tell. And this morning, I'm very glad to hear that UK is in the chair now as far as this wonderful initiative is concerned. I want to believe that now the cry from Ghana and the noise from Ghana that we don't want the shipping of the junk from London Felixstowe Port and London Gateway Port to come to Ghana, I think we are going to be given a hearing, and that dumping menace will stop. And I'm very, very happy about that. And I'm very optimistic that it's going to work this time around. Next slide. Another benefit that we have derived from standards and labeling is enhancement of consumer welfare. In fact, for all the MEPs that we have introduced in the market intervention have ended up producing results that have bettered the lot of consumers. The graph that you see there from the top, you see the blue line is the average consumption of a typical refrigerating appliance prior to the introduction of MEPs. So you see from 2013, there is a steep decline of the average consumption. It used to be around 1,200 kilowatt hours in a year. Now it has declined to 250 kilowatt hours in a year. However, the black line that represents volume, you see the volume has not changed much, but consumption has declined. The red line represents the cost of the unit of the appliance in dollar terms. There's a slight decline. So consumer stands to benefit if standards and labeling are introduced in the country. Next slide. And standards and labeling is a major tool of preventing market for lemons. We have put a very robust compliance regime in place. And the trend, as you see, between 2015 and 2019, the compliance rate for both air conditioners and refrigerating appliances are inching towards 100%. By so doing, we have succeeded in getting the substandard appliances from entering the market. The effect of having substandard appliances in the market is that they end up crowding out the good products, and then the substandard ones take over the market. And this is even scary to investors. No investor will want to invest in a country where substandard and used appliances dominate the market. So you end up preventing market for lemons if you adopt standards and labeling. The next slide. The other wonderful story that comes about when appliance standards and labeling is introduced is that you end up reducing your energy intensity. And from 2012 and beyond, Ghana has proudly joined the few countries around the globe that has managed to decouple economic growth from energy consumption. So the economy continues to grow. Demand for energy also grows at a reducing rate. And that is a good news to share. The next slide. In all this, you cannot rule out the importance of international collaboration. In fact, as we live in a global village, you don't necessarily have to reinvent the wheel. Other countries have taken the lead. There are agencies, institutions, organizations that have the knowledge base that can be tapped into. So these are but a few of the agencies and institutions and organizations that we have collaborated, and the results has been very, very enormous. Institute of Governance and Sustainable Development and Cool Coalition, for instance, have been a pillar behind us in our fight against dumping. Now, energy efficiency in Ghana has gone digital thanks to IE. That is where the capacity was built, and networking is also assured. U4E and BASE have introduced eco-fridges. In fact, this is one project that is going to introduce super efficient appliance in Ghana, because a financial mechanism has been put in place that will remove the first upfront payment barrier from the way of consumers. And for this particular project, the barrier, the bar for the MEPs have been increased. The refrigerant that needs to be in the appliance to qualify to join this project has also been changed, so that the HFCs and the CFCs laden appliances are all disqualified from joining this project. And that is a very good thing that has happened in Ghana. And come to talk of Alliance to Save Energy, Lawrence Berkeley, University, California, we have benefited immensely from them when it comes to training arrangements, that is networking, and to some large extent, financing. And the list goes on and on and on to REAP, which has also provided enormous financial assistance. Jeff, that is the organization that provided the needed assistance to do the famous refrigerating appliance energy efficiency project. So if you lose sight of international collaboration, then you become an island and there's very little you can do. And on that note, I say very thank you for the opportunity to share Ghana's experience when it comes to standards, labeling, and international collaboration. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kofi, for your rich and of course always entertaining presentation. I do love the market for lemons analogy, but you make some extremely important points, so I don't need to make light of that. Two really important things for other governments to hear, I think, in that are, the huge gains that Kenya has made through Ghana's made through standards and labelling programs, the really visible benefits in terms of improved efficiency and what that's brought you, plus the benefits of international collaboration. So thank you so much for that. We're going to go on to a presentation from another part of the region, from South Africa, another well-known standards and labelling program. This presentation is going to be given to us by Theo Clovery. So Theo, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mel. Good afternoon to everyone, and thank you to the IEA for inviting me. So my name is Theo Clovery. I'm currently representing SANEDI, which is an agency of the Department of Energy. The project, the Standards and Labelling project, was previously with the Department of Energy under a UNDP GEF-funded initiative. So I'll tell you a little bit about our experiences. I've been asked to speak about the successes, the challenges, and the importance of international collaboration. So let's get on with it. Thank you. If we can go to the next slide, please. So personally, I've been involved in the country's S&L program going right back to 2010 in some form or another. I've done work for the UNDP. I've done work as a private consultant. I'm doing work for CLASP now, who are assisting with the transition since the project, the GEF funding ended. So I've gotten to know all the role players and stakeholders in the country, and they've gotten to know me, and I've worked extensively. And I would strongly underline the comment made by Kofi about, if you do not work with the international community, you become an island. It is crucial to the success to understand about the trends, about new developments and the opportunities and the challenges and the learning. So what have we learned from South Africa's Standards and Labelling program? So the key successes, I would say, is that we have national standards and regulations for mandatory, as Kevin pointed out in his table earlier on, for those appliances that are on, you can see in front of you. And by and large, I believe we have a relatively good compliance within the industry of the major distributors and manufacturers selling products, these appliances in the country. The program has, not always, but on the whole, I can say that industry has supported the program. We had some challenges to start in the early days when I went to see one of the local manufacturers to speak about MEPS, because at that stage it was still voluntary. They showed me the door and said, well, if that's the government's position, we'll just shut our factory down and import from China. But they didn't, and they upgraded their manufacturing plant, and that same manufacturer, not the same person, is no longer with the firm, came back to us and told us, when are we going to strengthen the MEPS? So things can change, and I think sometimes industry does see the benefits, although it can be belated. I think the project has had effective awareness, educational and communication campaigns, and this is always, you know, how long is a piece of string with regards to these. You could have an endless budget, and as we all know, communication and marketing and awareness is a bottomless pit. You can put in a lot of money into it and it can be ineffective. For me, what's important is if someone is looking for information about appliance efficiency, can they find it easily? Then we've succeeded. We cannot expect to have billboards all over the place and TV advertisements. You know, as much as appliances are the center of my life, the average consumer, it's probably number 150 in priorities, and they only think about it, if they even remember to think about it, is when they're buying an appliance. So is it there when it's available, when they need it? And I think that gives a good signal as to whether you've achieved anything or not. Moreover, we did do quite a bit of training with sales staff in the major retail stores. We went national, and we developed material to train people. But that's, I think, had sort of so-so results, largely because there's high turnover of staff in that sector. The big one is whether we've been effective, as I mentioned earlier. And I think you can see here, as the program is maturing, we can start seeing how the unit energy consumption of certain appliances has dropped. We are now going through our first round of MEPS strengthening, which I also believe is a major achievement, and it shows progression, and it's something that the industry has to understand as well. It's not a one-off, you do MEPS and then goodbye, and don't come back to see us. It has to happen regularly. It's very important, and we can see that specifically for fridges and freezers, which have a relatively high penetration rate, consumers are benefiting, and significantly so. And specifically with freezers, I mean, at one stage, some of the chest freezers, the local manufacturer told me back in 2010 that it was a G, if you can imagine a G. And possibly even lower. They said it was too low to measure. So you can see it's important. And I think we did some good work with water heaters as well. And we received quite a lot of attention around the work that we managed to achieve with the new regulations around standing glasses for electric water heaters. So a study done by the Lawrence Berkeley Laboratory found that I think it was in 2019 rands, that if on these MEPS, the average household would be saving 683 Rand per annum in 2030 on electricity costs. And that is worth something. Possibly, it's 40 euros if I do a quick calculation, or possibly a little bit less. But it is material if you start going into middle and lower income households. And I think we can go further and we can achieve a lot more. And there you can see some of the environmental benefits of our efforts. So tiny, in terms of a couple of kilowatt hours, but when you multiply it by 16.6 million households, which is what we have in South Africa, and you look at the penetration rates of 80% for refrigerators, it soon adds up. So that's the good news. If we could go to the next slide, please. And here, I haven't spoken to Karen from UNIDO in some time, but I secretly think she saw my challenges. So these are, and it's very good that they align. You know, I'm speaking in jest there, but it's very good that the country experiences align with the funders' thinking, because if we don't have alignment, that becomes problematic with next rounds of financing, with expectations, with what's realistic and unrealistic. The one thing that I've been banging hard is that energy efficiency often does, but doesn't necessarily have to mean that appliance costs more. A more efficient appliance often is more expensive simply because it's got more features. And this is something that we all need to understand and appreciate. A study that was done by the program, and by the way, all of the work funded by the GEF program is on the website. Please go to savingenergy.org.za under reports and announcements. There's a lot of information on our experiences, on research we did, and it's available for everyone to use. So please feel free to go there. So that was an important thing for me to try and dispel this idea that efficiency means more money. It doesn't need to, especially if you can work in that direction. You can untangle that. The next thing is that unfortunately South Africa has limited testing capacity. We have some testing capacity. We don't have test laboratories for air conditioners. That's problematic. Some of the national test laboratories are not fully functional. That's a problem. Some are functional, but have long turnarounds times. That's a problem. So that is, it is problematic. Then the MV&E, in my opinion, is not sufficiently robust. It's largely, again, going back to what Karen was saying, it's not systematic. I would like to see a more organized, more long-term approach where it sends strong signals to industry to say that we are testing, we are assisting you in your efforts in compliance. It's so important for industry to see that government is taking this seriously. There's a much stronger likelihood of compliance if they see that. And they're right to expect that, in my opinion, because to register their products to be compliant, they pay a fee, and that fee needs to be used to make sure there's compliance. We have seen some resistance to MEP strengthening, and I don't know why. We started entering into the old 2010 discussions around jobs and shutting down and all of this, and a weak economy, and unfortunately the climate change is not waiting for all the stars to align so that we can deal with it. We have to move forward. And if we don't strengthen, we become the dumping ground. And I know we are becoming the dumping ground. Not necessarily South Africa, but Africa does, as Kofi pointed out. Another challenge we faced, but I think we're dealing with this quite well, is that the GEF project ended on the 31st of March, when it officially ended, and lockdown in South Africa took place on the 27th of March. So those two sort of happened within 3 days of each other. So it was quite a hard stop for the project. But we're getting through this. We've received additional funding. We've received support from CLAS, for which we are very grateful. Sanedi has asked me to stay on and do some work to assist with the handover. We've appointed a project manager who starts on the 1st of December, and she's listening in, Ashanti. So welcome to Ashanti. You'll all be hearing more from her very soon. And then finally, a challenge is that I do not believe, and this is probably aligned with experiences around the world, not only with appliances, energy efficiency, but just in general with energy efficiency. It just does not seem to enjoy the level of support that it deserves. And that's despite its successes, because I do believe, although not perfect, and although it could be much stronger, the SNL program has delivered something to South Africa in terms of energy efficiency. So those are my sort of main challenges that I identified. And now just to speak a little bit about regional, if you could just go to the final slide. So there's a lot of efforts. Corin spoke about the work being done by SACRI and IACRI, and it's so important that we all collaborate. You know, South Africa's been doing this for some time now. It's also an entry point for many of the products going into the region, either whether they're manufactured in the country or whether they are passing through our ports. And it's important because the regulator is speaking, one of a well-known South African country who's not involved in appliances, for some other reason, if I recall correctly, imported 300,000 incandescent lamps, which is not legal in South Africa, and said they were going to Zimbabwe, but they weren't. They were just going across the road. And so we've got to have regional standards where we align to stop all of this nonsense. So again, another advantage that we have our national standards. We have some testing facilities. I'm very hopeful. I have a meeting next week with the national laboratories. I believe that some funding is going to be made available to get them to where they should be. So that's good news, and I hope that that's going to take place. And you know, the region can leverage from the good work that's been done in South Africa. So you can see the points there. I won't go into them. Finally, the model regulations that are coming deserve a look in. You may not adopt them, but they're a starting point. And they've been developed by technical experts who do their best to understand the region, the requirements, the ambitions, what's realistic. So they really should be used as a starting point and can really help to get a standard across the entire region. So on that note, because I know we're a little bit pressed for time, I'm going to stop there, and thank you.
Thanks very much. Again, a really important story. Of course, South Africa's journey, as you said, started a long time ago, and it's a good indication that it takes some time to get these things going. But the more we can borrow from each other, the more we can share, the quicker that process will be. And that's one of the objectives of the initiative we're talking about at the moment. And acknowledging all of the activity that's out there, but trying to bring it together for this kind of longer term or mid-term planning process so that we can signal to industry where efficiency standards are likely to go, what government aspirations are likely to be. And on that point, I think it's really a good time to hand over to an industry representative, Michel Farah from Daikin, who has been involved in standards and labelling programs from the supplier's perspective for some time. And he's going to tell us what it looks like from a manufacturer's point of view. So thank you for joining us, Michel, and it's yours.
Thank you, Melanie, and thanks for inviting us to this distinguished panel. I was really delighted by all the presentations so far. I can only stress what we heard so far. My name is Michel Farah. I work for Daikin Air Conditioning, covering the Middle East and Africa area, and been involved into the regulation scene for quite a while in the region. And would like to give a perspective on the cooling sector as an appliance from a manufacturer point of view as well. Next slide, please. Thank you. I would like to quote first the Future of Cooling report, which was very recognizing the benefits of cooling actually in terms of the health, well-being and economic productivity, but at the same time stressing the impact that these devices could have on energy demand and also on the global emissions, local and global emissions. So from this angle, the cooling devices could contribute to at least 4 sustainable development goals. And we as a manufacturer feels the responsibility into contributing to these goals through research and development that we do heavily mainly touching, I mean, energy efficiency is one of them, of course, but indoor air quality is another one, contributing to sustainable cities through net zero buildings. And of course, doing research to lower the environmental impact and lower emissions of the cooling devices. Next slide, please. So the market, what we see from a manufacturer point of view, the AC market, as also Kofi showed in the market of Ghana, is growing at a higher rate than most of the regions we cover. We can witness 10% per year, and we think that this growth will continue for the next 5 or 10 years. The reason for that is higher rate of electrification in Africa, plus also higher rate of urbanization and economic development, increasing the disposable income of households, and the middle class as well is helping into acquiring more air conditioners. But that has the high risk of putting a big stress on the power demand, on the power generation sector. And as per the African Development Bank, they consider power demand could increase 93% by 2035. And that, of course, could affect the electrical peak load demand, which it can make power outages and power cutouts, and also in higher carbon direct and indirect emissions. Next slide, please. Thank you. If we look at the indicators of the current situation, and that's from the excellent CLASP report that was released in June this year, we can look at 3 indicators. The first one is the current energy efficiency ratio in 10 target countries that were selected. And we see that these levels are below the levels that we see in the exporting countries, which means that the countries are exporting units, allowing to export units that are lower in efficiency to their own requirements, local requirements. That level is around 3 watt per watt, and this is close to the MEPS in some countries, but this indicates the lower energy, the potential also to have higher energy efficiency units on the market. The second indicator, which is troubling a little bit, is from the refrigerant point of view, we still see the use of ozone depleting HCFC refrigerants such as R22 still being used, while it's also prohibited in many exporting countries. And the move is going not towards low GWP, it's moving towards high GWP R410A, just because it's zero ozone depleting. So here we have an opportunity as well to look and reduce the emissions and the damage we're doing to the environment from the air conditioners. Last but not least is the compressor type, is an indicator for the move towards higher efficiency. And except in South Africa, where we see that above in the 40% range, most of the African countries have an inverter ratio of less than 10% in the current situation, current markets. Next slide, please. Yeah, so this is today, I mean, when we look at Sub-Saharan Africa, we see the market being led by Ghana, and this is what we heard from Kofi. This is the speech of a winner, of someone who's leading, and the same from South Africa. We also have Kenya, which is a good example. Lately, have put a standard and labeling in place for air conditioners. This is the top of the pyramid, I would call. Then it's followed by few countries that are adapting either voluntary labels or pre-shipment inspections, mainly based on safety requirements and not energy efficiency. But then when we look, over 30 countries have no requirements at all, and this is an opportunity for dumping when most of the countries have their MEPS and their mandatory requirements. The products that are not compliant will move to the country that doesn't have any requirements. And this is the situation that we're seeing and we're hearing very frequently, and as also included in the CLASP report that was released earlier this year. Next slide, please. So we feel that the establishment of mandatory minimum energy performance standards and labeling have multiple benefits to all the stakeholders in a society. It will help eliminate inefficient and unsafe products from the markets, induce higher energy efficiency units to reduce consumer energy cost, as we heard frequently today. This all goes from the disposable income of the families by making a very cheap purchase, that this could be a used unit or low efficiency unit, but then being surprised in the energy costs that they take on a monthly basis, mainly driven from electricity costs. And the labeling also helps the consumer make the right decision. He might not need the top efficiency every time, but it can help him take the right decision to choose his right product for his application, but ensuring that the minimum ensure that we have a minimum efficiency on the market and we have safe and environmentally friendly refrigerants used in these units. Then to the economy, and that's a major impact, as we saw the stress on the power generation, that market growth is all gonna end up into demand on the power sector. And this is a heavy investment for the countries that will derive investments from other more useful parts in the society. So reducing the outages as well. And then that's a factor sometimes we were seeing more and more is the optimization for off-grid renewable energy installations. With the low electrification, we see higher speed in off-grid electrical generation. And we're gonna see in an example how efficiency in air conditioners could help in that point in particular. And last but not least is the ozone depletion, elimination and reducing the indirect emissions from fossil fuel burning, and also from the leakages of the refrigerant, the global warming, of course, that could damage the environment and help in the climate change mitigation. Next slide, please. That's an example on renewable energy optimization, where if we assume we're using panels of like 320 watts for 7 solar hours operating for a month, and then we compare a conventional split, 1 ton or 2 horsepower, and working for 12 hours, the number of panels required while using an inverter high efficiency units are 40% less. Well, in this case, we need 5 panels instead of 8, and the square meter would be 8 instead of 13. When we multiply this with on a bigger scale, we can estimate the reduction of resources that require to produce that energy and bring the positive effects of cooling. Next slide, please. Yes, so here we have an opportunity, and we heard that Theo touched on that, and previously as well, Karen and Kofi. The model regulation that was developed by United for Efficiency, mandated by UN Environment, was a very good example of collaboration, of involving all the stakeholders, and that covers the cooling equipment up to 16 kilowatt, agreeing on 1 testing standards, which is very important for manufacturers, that we follow 1 testing standards on a regional basis. And then it's agreeing to use an energy efficiency indicator based on seasonal performance factor, which shows the real efficiency of, like, let's say, variable speed air conditioner versus the 1-point ER for fixed speed. Also, it allows customization by using different weather groups. For the one primary weather group is for temperature from moderate to hot, and then secondary from dry to humid weathers. And then we have the minimum goes by product category and by weather group. And as we see on the right, these labeling schemes could help in establishing the minimum below which units could be banned. But then on the top line, we can see programs, incentives could be created, such as the eco fridges, for example, that Kofi mentioned in Ghana. That's a very good example, and we were participating in it. We hope it will be successful, and that would help also promote the use of this type of regulation. This next slide, please. One of the important things in this regulation, it covers both aspects of energy efficiency and refrigerant, which is not the case in many regions. So on energy efficiency, they used the minimum energy efficiency for fixed speed is a little bit higher than the India one-star model, and the model regulation for variable speed is at the same level of India 3 and 4 stars, and also the new grade 3 from China. This would ensure that products that comes to Africa are at least the product that are also acceptable to be used in the exporting countries, and avoid taking a product that becomes non-compliant in other countries. On the refrigerant, the regulation indicates 2 levels of GWP. ODP is 0 in both cases, but for refrigerators and for air conditioners, where the maximum GWP would be 750, knowing that today 410A is in above 2000, and then 150 for self-contained systems. One more thing, as a manufacturer, we think if added to this model regulation, which is safety, like a lot of safety requirements are increasing in Africa around IEC 6335-2-40. If combined with these 2 requirements, it will become a truly global, holistic regulation that could be used on a regional and wide basis. Next slide, please. So as a conclusion, we think that Sub-Saharan Africa needs to regulate energy efficiency for appliances to stop the dumping of inefficient and unsafe products. But at the same time, we think that speed is important to start, at least even with low levels, just to make the market get rid of all the inefficient units on the market. And then we think that this model is truly important to be presented as a basis for creating national cooling plans and national programs. And I would like to add that consultation with manufacturers would be very helpful. You can have the most stringent requirements, but if you allow the manufacturer 1 year or 18 months to prepare himself to be ready on the market, this would be really a good collaboration to make sure that the target is achieved. And last but not least is the market surveillance, which of course will become the stick, I would say, for helping into compliance. And this is very important also as we see incentives, but also penalties on non-compliant are also important and could move things forward. And that's all from my side. Thank you very much. Back to you, Melanie.
Thank you very much, Michel. And thanks particularly for the manufacturer's view, because it's tremendously important, as you say. And I was really interested in your comment, which I've heard before, about time being so critical to manufacturers. It's not just the level, it's when it's going to be imposed. And that's really one of the things that we want to achieve through this initiative. So we understand that there are numerous negotiations going on about today's MEPs or next year's MEPs, and the model regulations are a fantastic tool for that. But what we really want to do now is publish a plan, so that where are those going to be, what are the steps going to be over the next 10 years, so that manufacturers can prepare and know that what's going to be expected over a time period. And we hope that that will act to accelerate the ambition that governments will be able to achieve in appliance policy. So from a manufacturer, we're now going to go to talk to a retailer about their experience of standards and labelling programs. And so Alex, thank you very much for joining us. Welcome to the community, and looking forward to listening to your presentation.
Perfect. Hello everyone, thank you very much for the opportunity. In preparing for this call, I spoke to Theo, and we got our wires crossed, and what I walked away with was I was going to be talking for 5 minutes, and I definitely shouldn't have a presentation or PowerPoint, which is I've duly done, and I see that I'm completely, I'm in the minority on that front. I'm sure it was my fault, so I'm not blaming Theo in the slightest. Just to give you a little bit of context, I work for a retail business called Massmart. We are a high volume, low margin retailer. We operate 420 stores across 13 African countries. We are one of South Africa's leading retailers when it comes to high-tech products and large and small appliances. And we have for some time been working to try and afford customers the opportunity to purchase more energy efficient products and products that have are more environmentally friendly generally. So currently we track about 1,100 different product SKUs across our business. We monitor customer purchasing behavior. Recently, last year, we had the opportunity to work with the UNDP and Theo around trying to promote understanding and awareness among our customers related to large appliance energy rating labels. And so what we did was we did a full-scale revamp of our online platform to provide energy rating labels. We reviewed rating label penetration in our stores. We worked with manufacturers to increase the number of products that carried labels. And then we did a promotion where we encouraged, we selected the most energy efficient products in particular product categories: refrigeration, washing machines, dishwashers. And we incentivized customers to make different purchasing decisions by providing them with a discount. It was 400 Rand to purchase more efficient product in our stores. We learned a lot through this experience. It's by no means, we fully appreciate there's a lot of work we need to do to continue to encourage customers to make good decisions in our stores, but it was a learning experience, and we had some really great engagement from customers. So just during the 2-week period that we ran the promotion, we had a 100% increase in sales growth around energy efficient products, which was fantastic. We also had in the region of about 2.5 million impressions on Google related to this campaign, which we saw as a success because customers were interacting with this information, and potentially it was increasing awareness among our customers when it came to purchasing decisions. So coming out of that, I thought, I think the previous panelists and the presenters have articulated really well, the objectives and also the requirements around legislation and some of the challenges, and I think that they've highlighted that really well. I just wanted to perhaps point to a couple of the things that as a retailer, when I'm thinking about consumers and how we might fast track transitions to more energy efficient products and appliances, in Sub-Saharan Africa, things that we need to bear in mind and might provide us with some opportunities. So, a couple of things. It's been mentioned, but it can't be mentioned enough. We have learned time and time again with our customers, and we serve a wide cross-section of customers, that customers are not interested in paying more for products that are considered to be green. They want something that is green, but is also is cost comparable and ideally more affordable. I mean, just to give you a sense of the products that were purchased during the promotion we ran, in terms of the actual discount we were providing customers, it only represented between 5 and 8% of the end product cost. So it's not a significant reduction in product cost, but it resulted in a significant uptake on the consumer front in terms of purchasing behavior. So, product price and affordability are critically important drivers in transitioning and informing consumer behavior. So I just wanted to flag that. The second thing that I think is really important, but something that we need to bear in mind is we absolutely need to have great standards and energy appliance labels on our products so that consumers are equipped with sufficient information to make good decisions. However, we can't stop there. What we see is that when you're a consumer and you walk into one of our stores or one of our competitor stores, you are faced with a myriad of decisions that you need to make. Do I like brushed aluminium? Will this fit in the wall at home? The aperture I have for a stove? What is the price point? What are its features? Does it make ice? The result of that is because you are bombarded with a lot of information and things you need to make decisions about, the labels that we attach to products often don't drive purchase, certainly among our customers, we don't see a significant trend towards more energy efficient appliance purchases among our consumers. So we've got to find ways to communicate more effectively, to highlight to consumers the benefit of purchasing more efficient products, and to kind of insert ourselves at that point of purchase just to try and demystify some of this. Because when we did our promotion, we also did a series of interviews with customers in our stores. What we realized was, even though there was a rating label and we assumed that there was some sufficient information, many of our consumers were confused about what it meant and what that would translate to for them in terms of savings. So education is important, but also how do we demystify it, simplify it, and make sure that it's intuitive for consumers. Otherwise, what we're going to do is we're going to have we're going to have very energy efficient products, but consumers are still going to have a hit and miss approach with purchasing. So just an important thing on that front. One of the other things we learned when we went through our promotion and what we are continuing to engage with is we definitely need a strong regulatory environment, but one that creates an even playing field, because a consistent piece of pushback from manufacturers was, well, we're doing all these things, but we can see that our competitors are not, and therefore we're incurring additional costs and they aren't, and that's unfair. And how do you justify that? And that becomes a point of pushback and something that was a bit of a challenge for us. So, reinforcing a consistent playing field is really important in terms of how we drive this going forwards. And I think the example from Ghana was really, really relevant in the fact that they've clearly set strict standards and everyone is adhering to them. And I think that's something that we can certainly learn from. The other thing is that often when we are engaging with manufacturers as a retailer, they see this as a compliance program. It's an additional complexity for them. It adds cost to their product. I think we need to look at how we engage differently on this topic and get them to voluntarily look at revising products and improving the efficiency rather than being purely led around regulations and legislation. We're seeing that a lot of retailers and businesses globally are looking at the way that they do business and looking at renewables and energy efficiency. We do this in our stores as part of Walmart. They're very aggressive in this space, but we're not alone. I think just working with manufacturers to create a paradigm shift where we're not just trying to meet regulations and then minimum energy standards, but actually to reinvent the way we do this and produce products that are really affordable and highly efficient as part of the way we do business is going to help make sure that we're not just constantly sort of pushing the rock up the hill. So something important there around engagement with manufacturers in a way that's maybe slightly different from, particularly in South Africa, how we've done before. Additionally, what led us to this promotion and what has really created a heightened awareness in our business was a partnership and innovative engagement with UNDP and Theo specifically. So, Theo approached us with a really good idea around how we could do a promotion. Being innovative and not, can really break down barriers in this space and drive significant consumer changes ahead of where we are from a regulatory perspective. So I think we should keep that in mind in terms of how we can do targeted activations and engagement to bring consumers along with us and transition at a faster pace than purely we might get to through regulatory action. So let's just keep that in mind. And so, partnerships, I would say, is critical. Finally, I think in that same vein, we have seen in our market that there's been almost a significant transition to things like LED light bulbs as opposed to incandescents and CFLs. The price of LEDs has come down. Consumers can see the benefit of installing an LED versus a CFL bulb. And so we're just seeing that inherently the market is pivoting towards LEDs, which is further reducing the cost of LED production. It's also meaning that more shelf space in our stores is going towards LED. The reason I raise this is because I think it's important for us to look for those opportunities where, again, just ahead of regulations, by working with manufacturers to produce really affordable, really efficient product, we can transition consumer purchasing habits purely by offering them things that are compelling, affordable, and beneficial to them, and letting them make those choices going forward. So, there's a couple of thoughts from a retail perspective, and thanks again for the opportunity to present.
Thanks so much, Alex. Really interesting perspective, and really does chime with the comments we've heard from retailers in other parts of the world as well. One of the things that we wanted to try and promote are a couple of things that relate to this product initiative that you picked up on there were transparency. So the idea is if we could publish these ladders so that we know where everybody is going to be heading over the next 10 years, then that should help manufacturers, retailers, everybody know what's going on. So it's not all of these kind of negotiations are going on behind closed doors, which is a bit of a problem at the moment. And that, so as I said to Michelle, that helps from the point of view from a manufacturer perspective, but it does help retailers and consumers. It helps everybody know where the path lies, which is not clear at the moment to many people. And then the other thing is, if you have that ladder and you have those more ambitious levels being defined, it helps with all of those voluntary initiatives that you're talking about. It helps you reward the higher efficiency, but in such a way that it's pulling products through that ladder that you've already laid out. So that's really, what we're about here. I'd like now to call on our last panellist, and we're going to go to Peter Bennick now from the Swedish Energy Agency. Peter's been working in this world of international collaboration for many, many years. Peter, I'll let you introduce yourself. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And Alex, just to show you, this is my slide. So this is notes that I took now. You're not the only one, not using slides. Yeah. Yeah, thank you very much for this opportunity to speak. So I'm representing Sweden in this case, being a seed partner for many years, being part of the initiation of that program, working in IAEA context for a long time. And my daily work is really on policy regulations and policy work in the EU. And then we also as ELA partner then. So I was thinking, I mean, everything has been said in a way. I think this was really good presentations, and you took on everything I was about to say, but maybe three things, my sort of take on what you said. One thing is long-term leadership from governments. Another thing is alignment and collaboration. And then thirdly, the really, well, increased importance of industry engagement. You hear that from everyone now. So in my experience, when it comes to leadership, it cannot be over-exaggerated. It's so important that governments really are there to provide the platform for, as I call it at least, dialogue and process. You need to engage with all kinds of stakeholders, manufacturers, retailers, consumers, procurers, governments, and other governments. So dialogue and process is so important. So dialogue, you speak with everyone, and then you have a process also. It could be a very formal process, but it could also be under other programs, let's say. And I think sometimes I think about the role we play, how we are perceived by others. Now I'm thinking about the Swedish Energy Agency. We are subordinate of the Swedish government, so we represent the government in this case. And I think it's like we offer this platform, but the thing is also we are kind of there. We are present for a long time, and we are persistent, and we are patient. So we try to facilitate this discussion, dialogue process. We are not always agree with the stakeholders. Sometimes we kind of very stormy weathers, but still we are there. We will not abandon the process. We will always be there. So I think that is really, really important. And another thing is we can communicate the goals. I think it was Michelle speaking about the SDGs. So we have these overarching goals that we can communicate around and help, well, providing the context to all the stakeholders. And we know that they appreciate that, because some manufacturers, for example, they are fighting to defend why they are sort of green. Why don't they just earn money? They want to be good, but they have to defend themselves sometimes. And then it's good to refer to the government or to some hierarchy goals. So that I think is really important from the governmental side. Then about collaboration, that's been now repeated by so many. I made a list here, and then I heard coffee, and I realized I missed a lot. So it's good to hear more about that. So obviously there are a lot of things going on which are good. What I do think still, however, is we could maybe do even more for alignment. That is something we discussed. I mean, you and I, Mel, and others been discussing that. Can we do even more to align all these efforts that is going on? And I think that centers like the SACRI, Ghana Energy Commission, I don't know all about the platforms that exist, but I think they do play a very, very crucial role when it comes to alignment of this collaboration and synergy, enhancement, and all that. So I think we can work more on that alignment. And then thirdly, about the increased industrial engagement. So, I mean, industry is really the key for everything here, it seems like. They supply all the stuff we're using for the different services. Some of you touched upon this. If we now introduce regulation, we have to secure at the same time that there are market surveillance, otherwise they will not rely on the system. So when we are doing this international work, we are thinking about the capacity building that could be from government to government, sharing experience and all that. Regulations, test labs, market surveillance experience and all that. But it has to go hand in hand with also the technology transfer and sort of the financial system or business system. So there may be private partnerships or private-public partnerships can play a bigger role. That is something I try to understand myself, where we can do more. And as a fundamental there, I think for this system to work, it's really you need to do the market assessments. I mean, that is part of what a lot of you are doing, and others. The market assessment and then technology assessments. But here, I was thinking about, you said, Michelle, that we need to work together with manufacturing, and absolutely we do. We rely on you to get the information. And then we can also hear about what is a reasonable timetables and all that. So don't introduce something that goes too fast. But it's also important that governments do their independent assessments. It's really, really important that we have an independent view on our own on that. Otherwise, the discussion will be a little bit biased, I think. So I'm the last speaker, so I think I should stop here because we maybe need to discuss something. But in summary, then, long-term leadership, alignment of collaboration, and then increased industrial engagement. I think we can work more on.
Thank you, Peter. Great summary, and actually a great summary of today's presentations and conversation. Could I ask everybody who wants to be involved in the panel to turn their cameras back on, please, so that we can just see everybody. We don't have a huge amount of time, but a little bit of time for questions. And I'd like to start with Kofi, if I may. Kofi, we've introduced this concept of this long-term ladder, where we have these different performance levels that can be stepped through over time. They can be used as MEPs, they can be used for voluntary standards for procurement, they can attract incentives at the higher level, but they set out a transparent pathway. Do you think that's something that the Ghanaian government would be interested in working on? Do you think it's something that they could potentially adopt if the levels were set in the right places for you?
Well, thanks. Certainly, yes. Even before I was introduced to this afternoon, we have started something on our own. All the MEPs, the existing MEPs that we have are being, we have actually revised them to make them somewhat ambitious. And also in the regulations, we have stated that for every 6 years, depending on the global trend, we have to quickly adjust to ensure that we flow with the tide. So it is something that is happening already. We are very much aware of what is happening globally, and against the backdrop that we have had a very bad experience when it comes to dumping, we have positioned ourselves strategically to ensure that we stop the dumping menace. And the ladder that you showed, I think, is one beautiful way of avoiding dumping. Thank you.
Thanks, Kofi. And then, so Michelle, from a manufacturer's perspective, you know, we're promoting this idea with the assumption that the conversations we've had with manufacturers are kind of correct, and that the transparency it would bring would be useful. Do you think that's right, or is there something different we should be doing?
No, I think no more a way to make profit. It's really a responsibility as we see it now. I mean, there's always ways to avoid losing, of course, but the manufacturers are, the players around the world are known, and these people are complying with the regulations in the respective countries where regulations are put in place. But now when you come to a specific country and have some regulations, it's good to have, I mean, the consultation would help to make the product adaptable to the local country, because sometimes not only energy efficiency needs to be dealt with. In some African countries, we look at how rigid is the body of the unit to try to get transportation across the country, for example, or to be able to take high and low voltage fluctuations. So continuous stakeholder consultation, like having an association or some forum in each country where manufacturers are invited and we discuss the draft and the next regulation, like the one Kofi is talking about for the revision, is very important. Now, I would like to add one thing that Peter touched on, is the local manufacturers. Local manufacturers are in few countries in Africa, but they are very big market countries. They are manufacturing this low efficiency grade products. And if the government doesn't start and engage them into this discussion before putting the minimum, they could be suffering in the future from being taken by imported products. So it's very important to give them the chance to get leveled up and then put that minimum so that everyone can play the same game on the same play field. Yeah.
Sure, yeah. One of the kind of myth-busting pieces of research that we've been doing recently is looking at the cost and efficiency, which people have already talked about, but also where the products come from. And, you know, from the evidence we can gather in some parts of the world, then not only do efficient products not need to cost more, but they can come from local manufacturers too. So we hope to be able to continue to work on that type of analysis to help show governments that they will not be damaging, they're not necessarily damaging their own manufacturers. So understood, that's a really, really important point. And even more so in this current climate where we have the economic problems that everybody's facing and the desire for economic recovery, what we don't want to see is a pulling back of energy efficiency regulations in that context. And there is a temptation to do that, but we've talked about all of the benefits that energy efficiency brings, and we lose all of those if we're still not ambitious, even though this time is difficult. Karen, maybe I could ask you again about the ladder. From your perspective, working with ELA, can you see that whether you think it might be possible to for the project to work with that type of idea, so that we're providing not just, you know, what everybody's agreeing for the next step of MEPS, but the step after that and the step after that, so we can potentially work out what the next 10 years look like based on where we need to get to. Do you think that's doable? And if so, you know, how can we, what would be the next steps from your perspective?
Thanks for that. I definitely think it's necessary in order to have a vision also on the regional level. So obviously I can't speak on behalf of the decision makers of the countries now in our in the 21 countries that we are working with, but I believe, and from the experience we have in working with the regional cooperation mechanisms, I believe there is an intention, a strong intention, and the possibility to at least have a long-term strategy in place that we could achieve on the regional level and that we work towards. And I think that is something where I see a huge potential to collaborate with this new initiative, also in view of the COP coming up, where we could see how we can make a long-term envisaged commitment. Obviously, this has to be discussed with the decision makers, but I believe it's very necessary. So we are happy to support and to get in touch with the relevant stakeholders to take up this discussion.
Thank you very much, Karen. We've actually run out of time. We had great presentations. Some of them were perhaps a little long, but actually a really, really rich level of presentation. So what we're going to do next is come back to you all and try and talk in smaller groups about the detail. So if anybody on the line, anybody listening into the webinar, as well as of course our panelists and speakers, would like to be more involved in how we take this process forward, what the steps are, then please do let us know, and we'll continue. You know, this is, as far as we're concerned, this is very much the start of a journey, and we're looking forward to working with everybody to show this increased ambition and have a really strong position by the time we get to COP26. So thank you, everybody, and goodbye for now, and we'll be in touch soon. Bye.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.